Morning, guys. Can everyone hear me okay?
Morning.
Morning.
Morning, Scott.
Awesome. So, since we only have like 20% attendance at the moment, I'm going to give it another 5 minutes and see if the new semester can start off a little better than the last one ended. So, see you guys in 5. All right. Good morning, everyone. Hope you guys are doing well and that you all had a good winter break. And thanks for those of you who have your camera on. It's always particularly soul crushing to talk to a grid of black boxes. So it's really nice to actually see humans on the other side. So I was actually down in Arizona for the past 10 days, and which maybe some of you heard is like a global hotspot for COVID. So I always like to be at the hotspot, so it's definitely the place to be. But I understood why it was a hotspot, because you go down there and it's like there is no virus. Like nightclubs are packed and restaurants are packed. People are wearing masks, but there is no social distancing whatsoever. So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, back here in Colorado now, and glad to see everyone. I'm going to start off today. And by the way, I'm Scott Carmen. I'm the instructor of Land 444, Landscape Ecology. I'm pretty sure I know just about all of you, or I've had all of you in a class at one point or another before. I would like to go through today and do a quick roll call just to get an idea of who's here. I know I can see the names on the screen, but trying to cross-check that against a list and looking through the whole grid makes it a little bit difficult. So I'm just going to call out your name, and what I'd like you to do in response is to just give me a quick one-sentence response about what was the best thing you did over the break. So we'll start with Bryce.
Probably I just got to see my family in Nashville, which was awesome. And then I drove out there in November, and I came back in January. So I did like a road trip also.
Nice. All right, Jonathan, Cable.
Yeah, so probably the best thing that I did over break was snowshoeing up in the Wind, or not in the Wind River Range, in the Snowies up in Wyoming with my family.
Nice. Josias.
So I've been doing a lot of photography. So I got to shoot my photo, one of my cousins' quinceañeras, and then I also got to do my brother proposing for, well, he's getting married in July, so that's exciting.
Sweet. All right, Brendan.
I went golfing one time and I got engaged. So
congratulations. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Nice. When's the date?
We're thinking we're gonna do it like sometime next year in January. So
awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Jackson.
Just getting some time to relax without landscape architecture was the highlight of my break. So
relaxation is good. Emma.
I would say I went up north part of California and visited an old friend who lives out there, and I got to see the redwoods, which is a very beautiful area. If anyone has the opportunity to go, it's a once in a lifetime chance.
Yeah, the redwoods are absolutely stunning if you ever drive up that part of the country. Great. Annie.
Hi. I went up skiing at A Basin and had a really beautiful day there, and got to stay in a pretty nice hotel up in Blackhawk. So that was the best part of my break.
Nice. How are they dealing with it up there? Is it like one person per lift chair, or are they?
They're kind of not that much. It's pretty much the party just goes on their own lift. So they're not like trying to pack a lift.
Yeah.
And then there's like social distancing in the ski lines and having to wear masks.
Yeah. All right. Ching Ching. Ching Ching here. Okay. Let's move on to Cameron.
I'd say like my highlight was either snowboarding, or I also bought a new mountain bike.
Nice. Congrats on that. I saw, didn't you and your brother put in like a proposal for a competition or something like that?
Over the summer we did.
Oh, was that over the summer?
That was
Okay,
the dig design one.
cool.
hmm
Nice. Did you ever find out how that turned out or?
we didn't win, but they didn't
Oh,
really like place like they didn't really respond to it, so I don't really know. I
yeah.
just put it on my portfolio, so it worked out.
Those competitions are a great way to kind of get a little work under your belt and get practice.
Yep,
on that
exactly.
stuff. Cool. Jesus.
Hey, what's up, everyone? My highlight would be, just hanging out with the lady, my daughter, and my dog, spending time with them.
Nice. Let's see. Casey. Casey here?
Uh,
Ah,
yeah.
there you
Oh, my internet's kind of unstable right now. Yeah, I did some skiing. Gotta just kind of hang out, relax. It was great.
are. Great. Edwin.
What's up, y'all? I think a highlight of my break was probably just eating real food from like my mom's cooking. It's always nice just to get away from like all the college food. But yeah.
Nice. Eric.
My highlight over the break was being able to travel to Florida and visit some family.
Awesome. Yeah, it's nice to be somewhere warm, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go to the beach and hang out.
that was pretty much why I decided to drive down to Arizona. I just wanted to be under some palm trees and enjoy some warm weather.
Oh yeah.
All right. Let's see. Calvin. Is Calvin here? Next we have Alonso.
Yeah, I didn't do much. I just on the nice days I just went to the skate park and just learned new tricks on my BMX bike. Yeah.
Nice. John.
I went to Snowbird and went snowboarding for a week.
Very nice. Janak. Is Janak here?
Yes. I just came down to meet a few cousins down in Ohio and also drove down to Florida. Yeah, it was quite warm.
Yeah. I did you, so you drove down there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it like, I don't know. I found road tripping to be it felt very freeing after being feeling like
It was so much fun. I just wish we had a better car though. It was just like a minivan.
Yeah. Yeah, the ride makes a difference for sure.
Oh yeah.
Demison. Is Demison here?
Yeah, I think over the break I was just work out and then try to relax more.
Great. Jacob.
Yeah, I had a good break. I just went back home, hung out with the family and friends. And yeah, did the externship, which was a good experience too. And that was fun. So
Nice. Yeah, I think a bunch of you did the externship, right? Yeah, I see heads nodding. Yeah, hopefully you all had a good experience with that. Obviously it's, a weird situation with it being done remotely like everything else is these days, but hopefully you got some good experience out of that. All right. Who's next here? Eduardo.
I had a pretty decent break. Get to relax a bit. Drove down to Cruces, visited some old college buddies. That's pretty much it.
Nice. Becky.
Hey. So probably spending time with my friends like from the same country as me, since my family is far away from me, in different countries. So it's just really nice to have friends that shares the same cultures and things like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Ben.
I just went back to Austin and hung out with some family and friends and actually got to see some snow in Austin, which was like the second or third time I've ever seen that, but it was the most I've ever seen. So it was cool. Yeah.
I guess that's good.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really weird. I'm used to it up here, but not in Austin.
Yeah.
Like, at all.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, Yan Rong.
I spent my vacation to do the application for my graduate school. So I used this long time to do so many projects and make my portfolio better, and yeah, just do some things on landscape. Yeah.
Awesome.
No break.
Yeah. I felt a little bit that way too. Even though I traveled, I was kind of working the whole time.
Yeah, the last deadlines maybe 4 days ago. So no break.
Yeah.
No break for me.
Yeah. And Troy. Is Troy here? No, Troy. Okay. All right. So I think that's everyone. Is there anyone here whose name I didn't call? Okay, awesome. So I will close that. And thank you all for being here. Sorry, give me one sec. All right, so today's really just a class overview, and we're going to have a brief lecture that kind of outlines what landscape ecology is and talking a little bit about why it's important for us to study and giving a little bit of an overview of what we'll be doing. So actually, I think I'll start with that and then I'll go over the syllabus. So let's do that. I'm going to share my screen here. Oops, this is a little, let's see, let's try it this way. Trying to like fit everything on the screen so I can see the buttons I need. Okay, let's do that. Okay, share screen. And do that. All right, does everyone see that? We're good? Sweet, okay. So as I mentioned, this is Land 444. It's listed in the course register as Ecology of Landscapes. I don't know who named it that a long time ago, but it's really landscape ecology, and that's what the field is known as in the profession and in the science of landscape ecology. So that's what we will be calling it. In fact, I'm in the process of officially changing the name of the course to be landscape ecology. But I didn't want anyone to be confused about whether or not this is the right course. And so today we're going to start with an overview of the big question that I'm sure many of you might have, which is, what is landscape ecology? And we'll start our discussion of landscape ecology by talking about quilts. This is an example of a patchwork quilt that's called The Road to Nowhere by the celebrated Black quilt artist Rosie Lee Tompkins. This one was made in the mid-1990s. And why do you think I might be sharing this image of a quilt? Does anyone have any idea why would I be showing a quilt? What does this have to do with landscape ecology?
Landscapes are like mosaics or quilts.
You nailed it. Okay, I don't have to give the rest of my lecture now, so That's awesome. Yes, landscapes are a lot like mosaics or quilts. And in fact, the ways in which humans develop the landscape has a lot in common with a quilt. So let's start with an aerial photo of a natural environment, or I'll say quote unquote natural environment. This is about the closest thing that we have to a natural environment left in the world today. This is a portion of Yellowstone National Park. The reason I put the word natural in quotes is because there really isn't any place left on Earth that humans have not impacted, either directly or indirectly. So human activities have impacted pretty much every single place on the planet, either through climate change, which reaches everywhere, obviously, or in most cases directly by altering the landscape itself. So Yellowstone National Park is one of the few places we have that really has not been altered very much. So the area that we're looking at in this photo is about 48 million square miles of land. That translates into about 1,100 acres. And this is the kind of scale that we're typically looking at when we're working with landscape ecology. It's kind of large landscape areas. So I'd like you guys to think a little bit about some of the processes that create a landscape and that change that landscape. So what would you say is the most dominant force in this particular landscape? Just looking at the aerial photo.
Water.
Yeah, absolutely. Water is a huge and dominant element in this landscape. So let's look at, for example, we're going to be doing a lot of this semester is kind of understanding landscapes by reading patterns in aerial photos. So if we look at the aerial photo, you can see that there's a stream that comes down, or a river, right, that comes down from the lake at the top. You see that river coming down? There's kind of an area around it where the trees don't come right up to the edges of the river. Any idea why that is? Why are we seeing that pattern? And what is that area where there are no trees around the river?
Floodplain? Is it a hot spring?
Actually, the first one, somebody said floodplain, and that is correct. So that's essentially the floodplain, or the area that's likely to get flooded by the river. Another name for a floodplain is a meander belt. And the reason that's called a meander belt is because rivers are not fixed in their location. They actually meander and change over time. I remember that was something that was kind of mind-blowing when I learned it a long time ago, because I always thought of rivers as always being in the same place, but they're not. They move over time. Right. In fact, this is a time lapse of a river, the Ucayali River down in Peru, over a course of 28 years, showing how it has meandered through its floodplain. Right. So you can see that the changes in the course of the river can be pretty dramatic over time. All right, so that's one example of how you can read some of the types of patterns that you see in an aerial photo. What are some of the other patterns that we see here? So like, for example, if you had to classify the different types of large ecosystems or biomes that you see in this aerial photo, how would you describe them?
Forest?
Yep, we see large forested areas.
Well, grassland.
Grasslands, yep.
Wetland.
Wetlands, absolutely.
Riparian.
Is there like snow caps on the left top corner?
Yep, there are definitely some areas of snow in the corner there.
Is that a burn area on the right?
Yes, indeed. That's
okay.
Actually very good. And in fact, that area, yeah, it was at first when I looked at the aerial photo, I wasn't sure if it was a different type of vegetation or not. And then when you zoom in, you see that that it is indeed a burn area, and all the the reason it has that different texture is because all the trees have been blown over subsequent to the burn in windstorms. And so they're all laying horizontally there on the ground. So yes,
I
there
think
is
I
a
heard
burn
someone
area.
else say this, but riparian zones too, or riparian areas.
Yep, riparian areas. So for the benefit of the class, what's the definition of a riparian area?
Just like the interface between land and river, or land and that kind of like a wetland area.
Yep, it's basically the transition zone between dry land and actually any water body. It doesn't have to be a river. It can be lakes and ponds as well. What else do we see here? There's one more major type of biome or ecosystem that you guys haven't mentioned yet. Anyone? How about freshwater aquatic? Right? So we have those ponds, we have the river, there's animal and plant life in those places. And so that's another one of the ecosystems that we have in this landscape, right? So being able to read those sort of large patterns and understanding how they interact with each other is one aspect of landscape ecology that we'll be looking at this semester. Now here's a 3D view of the same place, right? So now we can see some topography. So does this give you a little bit different impression of what you're looking at?
Yeah.
In what way?
I think it just shows a lot more dimension. Like I thought there was like gonna be a big flat spot at least somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But you can, I think you definitely see that sunken area where it's like flooded, or like the little flood area.
Yep.
A little more.
Yep. And you can see on the right side over here, there's a pretty big mountain right here, right? So, you know, you can't necessarily see that when you're looking straight down on this kind of view. You can't tell if this area in the lower right corner here, whether it's flat or whether it's elevated. And so by looking at the 3D view, then we get sense like, oh, that's actually a pretty decent mountain right there. And so of course that's going to have its own ecology associated with it, right? So we can't just look at things in 2 dimensions. We need to understand 3 dimensions. Sorry, was someone saying something? All right. And now if we zoom out even more, to see a little bit of context of that area. So can everyone see my mouse pointer? Yeah, okay. So what the area we were looking at is basically right up in here. And so this is the larger context that we're seeing. So how would you describe this landscape in the larger context?
Mountainous?
Yep, it's mountainous. And the pattern that, what pattern are the mountains creating? Anyone?
Looks pretty glacial.
Looks like it could be glacial.
I think it's like almost creating like an enclosure surrounding like the bodies of water right there.
Bingo. It's basically creating this kind of a ring around that sort of lower area where we have all of our water down there, right? And this is the Yellowstone caldera. So this is the thing that'll probably kill all of us someday. So we should be aware of it. No, I'm kidding. It probably won't kill us unless you live a really long time. Actually, the eruption that created this caldera deposited up to 1 foot of ash over much of the western half of the United States. So if you thought the wildfires this past summer were pretty bad, imagine having ash 1 foot deep on everything. And it actually changed the climate of the entire Earth for decades. So that was a big explosion. Fortunately, it's very unlikely to erupt again in the next few 100,000 years, at least according to scientists. So unless you're going to live to be 400,000 or 500,000 years old, you should be pretty safe. But future generations might have to worry about that. So again, kind of looking at this larger context gives us some additional information about that landscape and about how it might have formed and what we might expect some of the characteristics of that landscape to be. All right, so now let's compare that to this landscape. This is Hannibal, Missouri. So up towards the upper left there in that developed area, you can see downtown Hannibal is this area right near the river. And this is in Missouri. It's obviously a human modified landscape. Does anyone know what Hannibal is famous for? No one ever hear of Hannibal, Missouri? It is the childhood home of Mark Twain. So Mark Twain grew up in Hannibal. A lot of his characters were based on his neighbors and his friends at the time, who also lived in Hannibal. So knowing that, what river do you suppose this is?
Mississippi.
Absolutely, that's the Mississippi River, right? So if we're looking at this human modified landscape and comparing this to the natural landscape that we saw earlier, what are some of the characteristics of this landscape? How would you describe what you're seeing here?
Well, the river has nowhere to move, which is the problem.
Yep, that's one aspect. So the river, there's development pretty much going right up to the edges of the river, right? Which is problematic because, as we just talked about, rivers tend to meander, right? And in fact, the Mississippi does still meander, whether people want to stop it or not. Sometimes it meanders, and it has meandered right into downtown Hannibal and caused pretty significant floods over the decades. What else do you notice about this landscape?
It's very human, as in that it's like parceled off and there's all sections for different things. Like this is farmland and this is city.
Yep. So we can see like different uses and the way that the land is sort of divided up. What else?
Some deforestation.
Yep, some deforestation, definitely. If you look down towards the lower center area down here of the aerial photo, you can see kind of areas of forest, and then you'll have some suburban development, and then another area of forest and more suburban development, another area of forest. So if you had to guess, what do you suppose this landscape used to look like before people came and started modifying it?
All forest.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit. Say that again.
Well, I assume it would be all forest, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So pretty much all of this area that we're seeing along the river would have been forested at one point in the past, right? So how would you describe what's been done to the forest?
It's been fragmented.
Yes, fragmented. That's a word that will be coming up against over and over again, because that's what humans like to do. We fragment things. Actually, it's not necessarily that we like to do it, but that's just the byproduct of how we decide to organize our landscapes, right? So instead of being one big forested area, now we have lots of little forested areas. And if we zoom in a little bit more, we can see some more of that fragmentation, right? So first of all, we'll notice some of that parcelization. I think Troy was the one who mentioned that, right? So you can begin to see how much people like right angles. You see all kinds of right angles that you don't normally see in natural landscapes. You can see some evidence of agriculture, right? You see the lines in the land down here. You can tell that some of this is agricultural land. We see some areas where it's just like a thin row of trees. What do you suppose that is?
Windbreaks.
Yeah, those are windbreaks, right? So typically you'll find those along the property lines or the edges of agricultural fields. So we're seeing evidence of, again, that parcelization down there. We're seeing some of that fragmentation. So what do you suppose that these types of patterns that are created by humans, what do you suppose that does to wildlife populations? Or what impact does it have on natural processes?
Well, they're like forced into certain areas.
Yep, that's one part of it. So they're, instead of being able to sort of roam widely, they have more limited areas that they can live in terms of the plant and animal life. What else? Is that a big deal? I mean, they still have some forests to live in, right? So they should be okay.
Migration patterns, it affects where they can move. Like, I don't know if anybody said that, sorry.
Yep. So they're more limited in their movements. And yes, I heard migration patterns. It definitely has a big impact on migration patterns. What else does it impact?
It squishes a lot of species together that wouldn't normally be that close.
Actually, well, it does in some regards, in the sense that we have more. So when you fragment a landscape, you end up with more sort of edge area around those landscapes where there's an interface between what used to be forested, or what is still forested, and was now a different type of landscape. So in that sense, you do have more species interacting with each other that normally would not, because you have more areas for them to do that. Right? So animals that like to live in the middle of the forest don't have so much middle left anymore. And they tend to live closer to the edges and interact with species that they normally wouldn't come in contact with. Right? So this has impacts pretty much on everything you can imagine in terms of wildlife, right? So if you are a badger and you live down in this patch of forest and you can't find any good mates, and you need to travel to find a good mate, it's looking pretty dangerous now, because you have to leave your habitat and travel across open land where you might get attacked by a hawk or other predators, in order to find a mate in one of the adjacent forest patches, right? This also changes the way that water moves across the landscape. So our hydrologic patterns are changed. And of course, that also impacts the wildlife. And even in places where it looks like we have a more or less continuous forested area. So if you think about this patch of forest here and this patch of forest, if you are a small rodent, let's say you're a rabbit or a mouse or something, and you're trying to get from this area over to this area, what do you have to potentially encounter on your way from one patch to the other?
Well, roads, and so that would be cars and people and everything that we are. So.
Exactly. So roads are, it turns out that when a vehicle and a small rodent have an interaction, it generally does not turn out all that well for the small rodent. And so you get roadkill, right? So even in places where there's a relatively small disruption in that pattern of fragmentation, it can be a huge impediment to the wildlife that lives there in terms of carrying out its normal life cycle. Right, and if we look at that, you can see that, you know, the patterns that we're creating in the landscape suddenly have a lot in common with some of the types of patterns that we're seeing in that quilt, right? And in fact, some of the terminology that we'll be using this semester that to describe landscape ecology, and that's used in the profession and in the science itself, comes from this particular art form. And we'll be learning a little bit more about that later in the semester. Okay, so why is it important for us to study landscape ecology now that you know a little bit about how human processes and human development affect landscapes? Why do you think it's important for us to study this?
To try and minimize impacts from development.
To try and minimize impact from development. Yep, that is one aspect of it.
To manage conservation, like in these areas that are, still minimally untouched by development.
Yep, absolutely, for conservation purposes.
Also to like get an idea of like how to work with the land as best as possible and like try to keep it as natural in a way.
Yep.
When like developing it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? So another aspect of it is restoration of landscapes that have been fragmented. So we have an area that's been highly developed, and we know that we have an endangered, let's say we have an endangered species of animal living in that landscape, and we want to try to improve its chances of survival. Understanding landscape ecology can help us figure out how best to strategically implement changes that can help that species. Excuse me. And so really when you come right down to it, landscape ecology is the study of the relationship between landscape patterns and ecological processes, and understanding how each of those affect the other. And understanding these allows us to do some of the things that we just talked about, in addition to being able to predict what kinds of impacts a specific design proposal might have on the local flora and fauna. So landscape ecology is, I think, is a fascinating topic, and it's a hugely important one in terms of how we decide to develop our landscapes and how we can make better decisions and better choices to live more harmoniously with the natural world. And it's a topic that obviously we'll be digging into in quite a bit of detail this semester. So that really kind of gives you an overview of what landscape ecology is all about. So are there any questions about that before we move on to the syllabus? All right, great. So let me now bring up the syllabus. All right, everyone sees the syllabus now? Great. So this is the syllabus for Latin 444. This is posted to Canvas. Here we see an example in the photo of a mosaic landscape of agriculture, forested land, and residential development. And we even see a little bit of a roadway here, right, going through in the lower left-hand corner. And this is, again, as we've discussed, pretty typical of human development patterns. There's a nice quote here that's from the foreword to Landscape Ecology Principles in Landscape Architecture and Land Use Planning, which I'll read to you. It says, "The thin mosaic, the tissue of the planet, is in upheaval. An urgent need exists for new tools and new language to understand how to live without losing nature. The solutions will be at the landscape scale, working with the larger pattern, understanding how it works, and designing in harmony with the structure of the natural system that sustains us all." That's a quote by Grant Jones from landscape architecture firm Jones & Jones from the foreword to that book, which is a pretty small, thin volume, actually. It's kind of a how-to manual of how to apply landscape ecology principles to land planning. But that kind of really is a good summary of why it's important to study this topic and why we need to understand it as designers. Once again, I'm the instructor, Scott Carmen. You guys all know me by now. Office hours are going to be by appointment via Zoom meeting. So just shoot me an email if you'd like to meet for any reason, and we can set up a time to meet over Zoom. And so in the course description, it talks about how ecology has really played a central role in landscape architecture through much of its history. So Even if you go back to Frederick Law Olmsted, who founded the profession in the way that we understand it today, ecology was an important consideration. And it has been even going back to and some of the gardens of antiquity. And in the last 20 or 30 years or so, there's been a big resurgence in the understanding of ecology and the damage that humans have done really to the earth in terms of how it's been developed, and the importance of reintroducing ecology into our urban areas and healing some of the landscapes that we've damaged through our activities. So within that context, the discipline of landscape ecology has emerged as a study of the interaction between the temporal and spatial aspects of a landscape and the organisms within it, right? So it's the way that landscapes have patterns, not just in space, but also in time, and how those impact the organisms, and also how the organisms impact those patterns. So it's a two-way street. It's not that the patterns only impact the wildlife, but the wildlife also have an impact on the patterns. And of course, humans have the biggest impact on those patterns. And so we'll be studying how humans have impacted those patterns and how those patterns can tell us something about how the ecology is functioning and how we can make it better. Some of the learning objectives for the course include learning principles of landscape ecology as a framework for landscape research, analysis, and management. Students who successfully complete the course will be able to describe the dominant themes of landscape ecology, describe current trends in the field, represent and analyze landscape patterns using GIS technology. So GIS will be a big part of the course. And quantify landscape patterns using a variety of metrics. So we'll be looking at how do landscape ecologists actually measure the patterns that we see in the landscape. And then you should be able to apply the principles of landscape ecology to the practice of landscape architecture and land use planning, right? So this is not just some interesting side topic that we'll be talking about that you finish the course and then you move on as if you never learned any of this stuff. This is stuff to be applied in your studios and in your thinking about how we work with land areas and how we can better accommodate natural systems and wildlife in our design decisions. The course is organized primarily as a lecture course. There will be a lot of discussion mixed in, as we've had in today's course, as well as some online discussions. And there will also be some in-class activities mixed in throughout as well. It's a cumulative course in the sense that everything that you learn will be building upon what you learned the previous week. That's typical of most courses, but particularly so in this course, where if you come in the middle, it's going to be really hard to understand what's going on. There's a lot of terminology in landscape ecology that you need to understand, and it's like another language. So if you don't understand that, you won't understand what we're talking about in course. So keeping up with the course content each week is really important. And to that end, I expect everyone to show up for the Zoom classes. If for any reason you cannot make it to a Zoom class, then the recordings will be available and posted to Canvas. Actually, I have a YouTube channel that I post the recordings to, and I share the links to those YouTube videos on Canvas. So you can go back and watch any classes that you may have missed. Since the class is being taught online this semester, all classes and activities are going to be conducted using Zoom at the link provided there. That's the same link that I sent out in the announcement yesterday. So I would highly recommend that you guys make a shortcut to that somewhere on your desktop so that it's easy to get to, so that when it's class time, you just double click that and you join the meeting instead of having to hunt around for that link each time. All assignments and projects will be submitted via Canvas unless I instruct you otherwise. And please use good file naming conventions so that when I download all of your files, I can have a good sense of what it is I'm looking at before I even open the file. So if you could label your file with your name and the assignment number, that would be super helpful. Some of the required supplies for this course. So we'll start with the computer related. In terms of software, ArcGIS is important. We'll be using GIS to analyze some of the landscapes that we're looking at, to measure landscapes, and to go through a couple of examples of how GIS is used in landscape ecology. So I highly recommend that you get GIS installed on your personal computers if you don't already have it. Those of you that I had last semester for urban design probably still have an active license, so you guys should be fine. The rest of you who need it, I have posted instructions on how to get ArcGIS Pro and how you can download and install that and get it licensed. That's posted to Canvas in the modules section under, I think I call that section computer resources or computer related resources, but you'll see the instructions posted in there. I know that some of you may have learned on ArcGIS Desktop. I recommend that you move over to ArcGIS Pro because all the examples that we do in class will be using Pro rather than Desktop. So, and it's a pretty big shift from Desktop to Pro. So if you don't already use Pro, I would recommend that you start using it because Desktop is going to be phased out over the next couple of years anyway. So Pro will be the only option pretty soon. So that's the first piece of software. The second piece of software you'll need is Adobe InDesign, and that's mostly for report compilation and page layout tasks. Sometimes I'll ask you to make like a sort of a research poster, and for your final project, you'll be doing a pretty in-depth report based around the landscape ecology of a given place. And so just in order to assist you with organizing those documents, you should have Adobe InDesign. I highly recommend a wireless 3-button mouse with a scroll wheel. It just makes using the software, particularly GIS, a lot easier. If you're trying to do it with a trackpad, it's just kind of miserable. So I definitely recommend having a mouse for using that software. I also recommend that you have a USB flash drive with a minimum capacity of 32 gigs for GIS data storage and project backup. For those of you who have worked at all in GIS in the past, you know that some of the data that you use can take up quite a lot of space. So having a separate drive for that and just having a place where you can kind of back up all your files is a good idea, because once you lose a project, it is not fun to have to redo it. So that's it for computer related. Now, for those of you who really need it, there are instructions on Canvas as well in that same section of modules on how you can connect remotely to some of the computers on campus to use GIS or Adobe or anything else you might need in case you cannot get it installed on your own personal computer for any reason. It does not work nearly as well as using it locally on your own machine. So installing it locally should definitely be your first choice, but in a pinch, logging in and using one of the other machines remotely is definitely an option. Readings for the course. So there are no required textbooks for the course. However, there are some recommended readings. And there will be some required readings in the sense I'll be posting some content onto Canvas that you will be required to read. You just don't need to purchase any particular textbook for this course, and that's because I draw my material from lots of different sources, and there isn't really one specific textbook that kind of covers everything the way that I wish it would. That said, you'll notice that a couple of these books have a bullet next to them. those are the best of the best. Those are the ones that, in my opinion, do the best job of covering the topic of landscape ecology and are kind of the best companions if you do want to purchase one or more texts for this course. The number one text that I would recommend is this last one by Kimberly With called Essentials of Landscape Ecology. That one is, first of all, it's the most recent. It was just published in 2019. And that one is a really great overview of landscape ecology and gets into some of the metrics and measurements and technology and GIS and all the different aspects of the profession and the science that we'll be talking about this semester. So if you'd like to get one book, that's the one I would recommend, is Kimberly With Essentials of Landscape Ecology. You can also get substantial help in terms of research and finding material through the library. I find remarkably few students make use of this, and the librarians are there to help you and provide technical support as well. So I have 2 phone numbers there that you can contact if you need to talk to someone. Those services are free for all of you. And you know, if you're trying to find specific information on landscape ecology, they can help you find it and cut out a lot of the time that you might spend trying to track down resources. You may or may not know that there's an entire map library that's a part of the Morgan Library, where they have just like loads and loads of both historic and contemporary maps. That can also be incredibly useful for landscape ecology in terms of seeing how landscapes have changed over time, or just getting a really good sort of detailed overview of an area that you might be working on that you might not be able to find online. So I highly recommend that you make use of those library resources for some of the research projects that you'll be working on. You know, that's part of what your tuition money is going towards, so you might as well use those resources. Grades will include assessment in conceptual knowledge and application, analytical and research skills, and written communication and attendance. Attendance and participation in class discussions will be also a critical component of your grade. I am keeping notes on who contributes to discussions in each class. And if we get to a point where I notice like, hey, you haven't contributed at all to any discussions in the last couple of weeks, that's going to begin to impact your grade. So you want to make sure that you're contributing on a regular basis. In fact, in order to make sure that everyone is there and paying attention, I will periodically call on people randomly to make sure that you are actually at your computer, especially those who have their cameras turned off. Because it's hard for me to tell if you're actually there when I just see a black box with your name in it. So what do you think about that policy, Eduardo? Yeah, it's a good one. So I'm glad to see you're there and still paying attention. I'll do that kind of thing occasionally, where I'll call on specific people to address questions or to contribute to the conversation, mostly just to make sure that everyone is there and paying attention and to keep you on your toes for the full hour and 15 minutes that we meet each time. The percentages of the exams and the assignments and the final project are all listed on the left there under evaluation. On the right side is how the numeric grades will be translated into letter grades. That's all pretty standard. Attendance is a, excuse me. Attendance is a critical component of your grade, as I've already mentioned. So you're expected to be in class. I reserve the right to reduce your grade by 1 letter grade if you miss 3 or more class sessions. Now, I understand that missing class sessions does not necessarily mean that you're missing content, because I will be posting recordings. So, you know, if for some reason you can't attend for a few classes, excuse me, so sorry. But if you know for some reason you won't be attending for a few classes and you need to watch the recordings, as I said, please just let me know so I know why you're not there. Under that, we have the exam schedule. So exams 1 and 2 will be covering only the lecture material and readings that were assigned since the previous exam. So exam 1 covers everything from today up through the date of exam 1. Exam 2 covers everything from the end of exam 1 up to when exam 2 is administered. And then the final exam is cumulative. That will cover everything we talked about all semester. The dates of the exams are listed there. So I would put those in your calendar, make sure that you are available at those times. If for whatever reason you won't be available during one of those time slots because you have a conflict, let me know right away so that we can set up an alternative time for you to take the exam. If you email me like a day or two after the exam and say, hey, I couldn't take the exam because I was at my cousin's wedding or whatever it was, unless it was like some urgent emergency that happened that morning, you will not have the opportunity to make up that exam. So let me know ahead of time if you will not be available for any of those exam periods. I will say that all of the exams will be conducted through Canvas, and they'll consist of a mix of true, false, multiple choice, and multiple answer types of questions. So when I say multiple answer, that means that there are multiple right answers to the question I'm asking, and you only get full credit if you select all of the right answers. Multiple choice is one correct answer, and then you know what true, false is. Some of the policies around exams and assignments. Everyone will receive access to the exams and assignments on the same day and at the same time. And I encourage you to make your best effort to submit all of your assignments on time and attend all exams on time. And as I mentioned earlier, if for whatever reason something happens and you can't make it, just let me know and we will make arrangements. Submission of assignments will be on Canvas unless I tell you otherwise. Course communication will also happen through Canvas. So I recommend that you go in and check your settings on Canvas because you can choose which email addresses receive things like announcements or changes to assignments or exams or anything like that. So make sure that you are receiving all of your notifications from Canvas at the email that you check most frequently. So that if I tell you like, hey, that assignment that's due on Thursday, we're actually changing this part of it, that you will see that right away and not spend time, unnecessary time doing the wrong thing because you did not see that announcement in a timely manner. Short of that, you should just check Canvas on a regular basis for updated uploads of recordings of the classes, as well as any announcements I've made on the website. And also, you guys are responsible for monitoring your grades as they are posted to Canvas. If you think there's some major discrepancy in your grade, like, wait a second, I turned that in. Why does it say that? Why did I get a 0 for that assignment? Or why is my grade low for that assignment? That doesn't make sense. Contact me immediately. I'll give you a week from the time that the grade is posted to file any kinds of concerns that you might have regarding your grade. And you can have an opportunity to remediate any problems that there might be or clarify those problems within a week after the grades are posted. So it's up to you to keep on top of that, to check your grades on a regular basis and contact me if something does not make sense. This section that says technology, usually it says technology in the classroom. I changed it to technology is the classroom because that's how we're meeting nowadays. That said, when you're in a Zoom meeting for class, you're expected to be fully present and paying attention to this class and this class only, and not emailing your friends or texting people or checking Instagram or whatever it is that you can, whatever other things you're able to do on your devices. So you're expected to pay attention during lectures and work only on Land 444 activities during our class meetings. So that just helps to foster an engaged and respectful community in the classroom. Isn't that right, Becky? Becky?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. By the way, a little hint for Zoom is that you can hold down your space bar to temporarily unmute yourself. So if you're muted, and instead of fumbling around looking for the mute button to try to unmute yourself, you can just hit the space bar on your keyboard and you'll temporarily unmute so that you can respond or say something.
I thought you said Becky, and I was so confused. I was like, who is Becky?
Oh. No. All right. Course schedule. So this is the schedule for the course. Each of the topics we'll be covering. So this week is course overview and fundamentals of ecology. Next week, we'll be doing a more in-depth introduction to landscape ecology. Then we'll talk about the history and evolution of landscape ecology, some of the principles of landscape ecology. Then week 5, landscape heterogeneity and structure. Week 6 is landscape pattern and ecological function. That's also when you will have exam number 1 on February 18th. Sorry, not February 18th. Wait a second. Yes. I must have changed it. Actually, that should say February 23rd. Sorry, because I moved that exam and I did not update the date. So that's on me. But I will fix this and I will repost this, this syllabus to Canvas. So actually your first exam is going to be February 25th, which is during week 6. And then week 7, we'll have introduction to GIS and talking about GIS data and its applications in landscape ecology. And after that, we talk about landscape patches, then landscape edges and boundaries, and landscape corridors. And then we have exam number 2. Again, I got it wrong. I moved the exams around and I did not update the dates. So for those first 2, the final exam is still right. But exam 1 and 2, the dates are wrong. I will fix those and I will repost this. I apologize for that. I was kind of shuffling things around as I mostly because spring break moved to be so darn late in the semester this year that I had to kind of move everything around. So I will fix
just
those.
cancel those exams.
Yes, I guess that's the best policy.
Yeah, that's the best solution
cancel
to
them
this.
entirely. No, nice try, but that is not what will happen. So just make sure you check back on here a little bit later today for an updated version. I'll post an announcement too, letting you know about that. And then after that, we'll talk about landscape matrices and mosaics. We will have a guest presentation during week 12, which is considered part of the curriculum. So you will be responsible for the material that's covered in that guest presentation. It's going to be some presentation on work of a landscape architecture firm that actually deals with issues of landscape ecology and how they approach those issues in their work. Then we have spring break, finally, April, the week of week 13, April 13th and 15th, no classes. I really hate that. The thing I hate most about the fall semester is that fall break is like so late that you're like just completely desperate for a break by the time it comes around. And usually in the spring, the spring break is right in the middle and it's great, it's perfect. But of course they decide to move it to the end of the semester. So that'll be in week 13. And then as you may know, once we get back from spring break, everything, for those of you who have some classes in person this semester, everything will be online again, kind of like we did in the fall after the fall break. So after spring break, everything is online. That doesn't really impact this class, of course. Week 14, we'll be looking at landscape mapping and metrics. Then week 15, we'll talk about your final project and do some virtual desk crits. We'll continue those into week 16 and have final exam review. And then week 17 is final exam week, and that's when you have your final exam on May 13th from 2 to 4 p.m. If you need any help, just contact me at any time through email. That's the easiest way to reach me. I'm happy to set up a Zoom meeting at a time that works for both of us. So just reach out to me by email if you need anything. And then finally, the last page is just boilerplate university policies. A lot of these don't really apply the same way in a virtual classroom because we're not meeting in person, but it's the same stuff that we talk about every semester. Just be respectful of your classmates and contact me if you have any issues or anything comes up. And, you know, let's try to create a healthy and productive classroom community for the course of the semester. So that is it for the syllabus. I will stop my screen share. And that is it for today. So no formal assignment for today, other than I recommend that you get your computing situation all squared away. So make sure that you have the software that we will need this semester. Check on those guides online, specifically the one for installing ArcGIS Pro, if you need to do so. Make sure that your Adobe license is up to date. And then we will really hit the ground running on Thursday. So any questions about any of that?
Scott, I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Would we be using the ArcGIS like right away, or would we be using it like according to the schedule?
We will start talking about it before it shows up in the schedule, but we won't be using it until the week where it mentions GIS in the schedule. So
okay, yeah, I was just not
you have
sure
a
about
few
that.
weeks. You have a few weeks to get that set up, but please do not wait to do that. Do that now, because in the past I've seen, especially with ArcGIS Pro and the way it's licensed with a login as opposed to just having a license code, it doesn't always work, and sometimes you need to email several times back and forth with Diane Noren, who is the person who deals with all the licenses on campus. And, you know, it's not the kind of thing that you can always set up at the last minute. So you want to give yourself enough time that if there are complications and you need to get those figured out, that you have time to do so.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you know if they would be willing to give free licenses for like SketchUp and Rhino and
That isn't that. So you do not need those licenses for this class. All
Yeah.
you need is ArcGIS Pro and InDesign. That said, I know that there were at one point free student licenses for SketchUp. I think those ended last year. If you haven't installed, if you're on a machine that has not had SketchUp installed before, you can get like a trial version for I think 30 days. Same with Adobe, but Adobe does the monthly licensing now, and they have a student price, so it's not much. I think it's like $20 a month or something. So
yeah, because I have Adobe and I've been using the free trial for Rhino, which is actually 90 days, which is pretty good. But I was just wondering for SketchUp because I was trying to update some portfolio stuff and
Yeah, you can look up SketchUp Make 2017, and it's a free download, and it's pretty much a full version of SketchUp.
okay, cool, thank you.
yeah, those decisions about the software licensing are actually controlled by the individual software companies, not by me or the university. So, but you do have free access to AutoCAD as a student. You have free access to ArcGIS as a student. You have free access to 3ds Max for anyone who likes. That's my preferred modeling software because it integrates directly with AutoCAD. So that's also free because it's an Autodesk product. So
What was the name of that one?
3ds Max. it's a 3D modeling and animation program. All right, any other questions? All right, in that case, I think we're good, and I will see you all on Thursday.
Sounds good.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Scott.
Good one.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you. Take care.